From ABC News Radio, KMET 1490 in Southern California. This is Biz Ninja Entrepreneur Radio with your host, Tyler Jorgensen.
Welcome out to Biz Ninja Entrepreneur Radio. I am your host, Tyler Jorgensen, and today we have comedians in cars we have Travis Chamber coming to us live from his Porsche, which is awesome. And I love this, Travis, for a couple of reasons, because to me, like, business is secondary to lifestyle. And I love that you're exemplifying that right now. So welcome out to the show. I'm super excited to talk entrepreneurship, ads, and agencies with you.
I'm excited.
So you and I first connected years ago, before I think Chamber Media really started. Like, you were just getting started with it. And so the first question I have for you is really what I ask most people when they come on, which is, when was the moment that you first realized, like, in your life, that you were an entrepreneur?
You know, it was weird because I always did entrepreneurial things, but I just, my dad climbed the ladder at Monsanto, which, you know, has been an interesting company and impact on the world.
Right.
But I always just thought, you know, I really value family, and my dad traveled a lot with sales, and somehow I thought, oh, I should climb the ladder too, but I want to have a 9-to-5 job so that I'm home with the kids in the evenings, unlike what he wasn't able to do. So I it's funny because I started climbing the ladder, but then I started looking back and I'm like, but when I was in college not with a 9-to-5 job, I was always doing entrepreneurial stuff. Like, I started MMA fight promotion. I was like a little mini Dana White in Northern Utah and put on the first MMA fight series up there. And it's still running 10 years later, which is wild. They're in their like 30th event now, and a few thousand people come to these things.
Wow.
And then I went to 20th Century Fox, and there was a seed planted, though, about 6 months before I left and started my own thing. There was a seed planted where I was just sitting next to someone at the agency I was working at in LA. And she just started talking about people who are doing freelance and people who were doing stuff. And I'm like, people freelance like full time? That's a thing. And so then I was like, oh, maybe I could make some extra money by trying to do some freelance stuff on the side. And sure enough, within a month or two, I had I think 2 clients that I was doing some stuff for on the side. And I think they were paying me like a couple grand a month or something. And I was like, whoa, I was making 80 grand a year at the time. And another 24 grand is a big deal, huge deal. And I was like, holy cow. So then I went to 20th Century Fox, and I had a really bad experience there. And I was just really overwhelmed. I wasn't really qualified for the job that I had gotten into. I wasn't really built for the pace or navigating the like structure of that industry, especially against people my age who didn't have kids and were willing to work way more than I was. And that's when I thought, so they laid me off because I honestly wasn't doing a very good job. We had just had our daughter, and
yeah,
you know, I wasn't bringing the rain at all. But they gave me severance, and I was at this internal agency within 20th Century Fox called McBeard. I'd only been there 3 months, and the founders still gave me severance, which just shows you how good of guys they are. But I had 3 months of living costs and severance. And that was the moment. That's when the light bulb went off. I'm like, I got 3 months. So I said to my wife, I was like, babe, if I go get another job in the advertising industry in LA, being a mid-senior level person, they're going to work me to the bone. Like, there's nowhere I can go in this city that's not going to be 55, 60 hours a week. So maybe should I just give this 3 months and just see what happens? And she was like, yeah, let's go for it. And what's funny is I actually did not land a client for 3 months at all. And I had these 2 clients that I kind of was growing, and I was able to grow those, I think, to like maybe 3 or 4 grand a month, maybe something like that. Which really wasn't enough to pay the bills. And obviously we partied pretty hard during those 3 months. We went on some vacations and spent some money we shouldn't have. But we get to the end of that 3 months, and I think we were getting to the point where we were kind of starting to live on credit cards. And that's when I got this $60,000 3-month contract from a company called Fisber, which does like real estate leads. And that is the moment where I was like, oh my gosh, we just got another 3 months. Let's keep going. And then I think that they fired us after
when
4 months.
You're at the early stages of this. I want to kind of unpack it a little bit, right? So you were doing advertising, you're doing agency stuff. And I always find it interesting the people who come from, even though you weren't there a long time, from the corporate side of things into, freelance or solopreneurship at the beginning. Like, how did you decide, even from a simple level, like what you were going to offer, right? Because you go from having a team of people that are going to fulfill to an individual, right? So how'd you even figure that out? Like, how'd you decide how you can go sell a $60,000 contract?
There were 2 books that really changed my life. One was the 4-Hour Work Week. And I've never really read more than like the first half of a book. That's just one of my things. I just can't do it. I don't know why. I've tried, but I get halfway through and I'm like, yeah, I get it. So I read that and I was like, this book's not very realistic. Like 4 hours a week, not very realistic. Like even now I'm semi-retired and I still work more than that. So then I read the $100 Startup. And the $100 Startup, I highly recommend for anybody that's ever thinking about maybe starting a company. It's the most practical, realistic way. It's all about starting with a service. So before you try to do software, before you try to build a physical product, which requires molds to be made and a supply chain and a warehouse and capital, you should almost always start with the service, especially if you've never ran your own company before and you don't have any experience in startups. You really shouldn't just like jump headlong into fundraising and start. I don't think. I think you should put in 2 or 3 years as building a service, because that's how you build expertise. That's how you build a network. And it puts you in a position where you can't take any shortcuts. But it's also very low risk because you could sell your time. And if you can get $4 or $5 grand a month for your time, then you can make it. And so that book is just a series of stories of people who just started with a service. And one of the stories was about a media buying agency. And at the time I was doing some influencer deals and I thought, all right, I'm going to just like put this little bundle of services together that are what I was doing at the agency, Crispin Porter McGusky. And it worked. I got some influencer deals, and we got some ad spends. And then it just slowly, the way I grew the business was just following people around at conferences, asking people to go to lunch. I mean, the most grassroots, grinded out description possible is how I started.
I love that. And so from that evolved Chamber Media. Why don't you kind of give a elevator pitch or a bird's eye view of what Chamber Media is and what it is now?
So Chamber Media makes data crafted social video ads. So we do video production, we do ad buying, and then we have this internal software called The Brain. We put 50,000 of the top 1% of the top 2,000 Shopify stores ads into a database. We had machine learning engineers mine that database, and we found tons of insights and developed the 7 foundational ads, which is the core of everything we do at Chamber. Is we start with these 7 foundational ads that get the highest performance, and then we build on those because we identified 100 ad types that are the top performing. So we built this really solid approach and a very data kind of protocol approach to making ads, rather than a bunch of 22-year-olds making what they think should be made, or making what the company's CEO thinks should be made, which doesn't work either. So that's kind of the lay of the land. We grew to 125 employees.
You go from a 9 to 5 or a 7 to 7, right? Like they're never really a 9 to 5 in that world. And then you go to freelancing and some solopreneurship, and then now you get all the way to Chamber Media, where you're bringing in strategic partnerships, you're scaling, you're doing all of this. There's going to be some lumps along the way. What were some of the early mistakes that you made, and what did you learn from them?
Early mistakes that I made was being too emotional and just being too tied up in the business. I would get really like emotional and heated, and it really, actually, I had 2 partners in the beginning. It really bothered them, and I just attached so much of my ego and my pride into the work that I didn't really take feedback very well. I take feedback now because I don't have much to lose. ClickFunnels actually just stopped working with us after a year because they just weren't that impressed with a couple of the things we were doing. A couple of years ago, I would have taken that so hard. But now I just reached out. I was like, hey guys, thank you so much for working with us for the last year. Like, what can we do better? Where did we fall short? And I got some incredible feedback to take back to the team. And now we're going to be way better. But the truth is like, we're in a position where we can afford to lose an account like that. It hurts and it sucks.
Yeah. It's still never fun, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that mindset, like, I wish I would have asked more clients, because there's a lot of turnover in this industry.
Yep.
And I wish I would just been like, hey, now that you've fired us, what can I do better? You know?
Yep.
But instead I kind of fought them. And because the truth is, sometimes clients do things that they shouldn't. And they try to get as much out of you as they can, and they get overscoped, and it creates a lot of resentment sometimes.
Oh yeah.
And then like 1 in every 20 clients is completely psycho. They're completely psycho. They're out of money. They're counting on you to make their business work, which shouldn't really be your responsibility. And so I've had like 7 or 8 complete psychos that made me really jaded too. So anyways, I wish I just would have removed my ego and been a little bit more accepting, I guess.
Yeah. And I think that's really a common thing that comes with maturity. It's really hard in the beginning of a business when you don't have a ton of social proof yet. You don't have a ton of experience. You also have the scarcity of, each client really matters, right? You need the cash flow. So all of that, it puts up a lot of barriers. But I have found from personal experience and from the people I've worked with, those who grow the fastest are those who can set that ego aside and just learn at a faster pace. Because all you're doing is harming yourself from future opportunity and future growth to keep those walls up around your ego and protecting it, right? So like embracing it, feeling that it does suck. And you know what? Sometimes it's the client, but it doesn't mean that client won't give insight as to how you could actually improve, right? They've already fired you. Might as well learn from it.
It's hard when you're early on too, when you're doing all of the work and then you only have 3 clients and one of them fired. It's kind of like, it's hard to not take personally. You know?
For sure.
And then the other thing too is I wish I would have gotten the right people on the bus sooner. Oftentimes what I would do is I would bring on people that I could afford at the moment in kind of a scarcity mindset. And so sometimes I would bring people aboard that had issues, and maybe Chamber was like the only place they really could go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
so how do you bring the right people on the bus when you have limited resources?
You got to kind of just take a huge risk and just pay for them.
Just figure it out.
It's so scary because when you're only like 2 people or 3 people, and because I've had the experience too, where I paid someone a ton and brought them on board. They didn't really bring the rain, and they actually didn't. They had a lot of issues and weren't even showing up to work all the time. And they were getting paid, I think it was like 120 grand or something. It actually really hurt the business really bad.
That can set you back quite a bit in terms of momentum, energy. But clearly, like it wasn't that many years ago that you got started with this, right? Like I was looking at
almost it was like 7 years ago actually.
Okay.
But like until
when did you guys hit your stride?
3 years ago.
Yeah. So that's where I really noticed like, holy cow, Chamber Media's in massive growth.
I mean, until then, it was just me and my partner. He started out as an intern. A year later, I made him my partner. And it was just kind of me and him, like a boutique 2-man, 3-man shop kind of thing. It wasn't like a real company. I tried to make people think it was a big company, but it wasn't. But it was 2 years ago that it really just 3 years ago, it started to grow and become a real company. And then it got to the point where we were overgrown. We need to lay people off. Then we started running ads, and those ads, go figure, crushed it. And that's when we went from like 15 to 125 in like 14, 15 months or something crazy like that.
I know. I watched when you guys made those transitions, right? Where you kind of, you could see it, right? You put ripples out in the marketplace, and it's clear. What was the catalyst? What made you decide now's the time to lean in?
You know what's so crazy is like the millions I've made over the last couple years all came from one decision, and it was from a bad business decision, which was like literally being too much of a coward to lay people off. I couldn't do it. I never really fired people, which was a mistake. And I never really like laid people off, which was also a mistake. But we got to like 15, and we had some clients back out, and we had a string of referrals that made us grow. And then that first client got ticked and got the other string of referrals to let us go. So we just lost like this big chunk, and we were overgrown. And it's like, oh no, well, I shouldn't have built a business off of referrals. Like, we've got to have something replicable. I can't, all of our leads were just coming from me speaking at conferences, chasing people down, and just hounding people and bothering people constantly. And a lot was coming from organic LinkedIn too, which is a pretty scary lead source. And so one day I was just like, all right, these big, expensive videos aren't working. The success rate is not as high as they used to be. And Facebook is now requiring more small pieces of creative. And I was seeing a lot of brands making really small, cheap stuff that was working. And I was like, all right, we got to get into this. So I came up with the idea of the micro video program. Let's make small stuff. And then let's do a bunch of research to figure out what kind of videos should be made. And let's see if we can develop some kind of like taxonomy or special sauce approach to the creative. And a lot of people in the company were just like, we shouldn't do that. And I hate to say it, my partner, even Stefan, he's going to be mad. He won't ever admit this, but even he was like, I don't think we should do that. I don't know. But we did. And we hired this guy named London Lazarson, who was just an awesome powerhouse. And he's not with us anymore. He now has 8 million followers on TikTok and is crushing it.
Wow.
But we spent 6 months building that program, clients telling us that our stuff sucked. And it was almost like we were starting over kind of. And then we started running ads. And by running ads, we were finally able to sell something for a lower cost. It was the first time that we ever sold anything below 100 grand, because we had always held to this mentality of like, we've got to be premium because we're small. We have to build the Tesla Roadster. We have to have this mega premium, super custom tailored thing that we do a low volume of. That's the only way. And we were very profitable. I think our profit margin at that time was like 40 or 45%, which is really high for an ad agency.
Yep.
And then, when we launched the micro video program, our profit margin went way down, but our volume, like 20x. So that was the decision maker, is just lowering a cheaper priced offering and doing a higher volume play.
So it was like you went from the Roadster to the Model 3.
Yes. And we never wanted to do that, Tyler. We always wanted to be this amazing, the best agency on the planet that was small. And we made fun of people that did the volume thing. And a lot of agencies, you've seen it too, Tyler, these agency of record, creative agencies, they'll get like these big accounts and then they'll lose a couple of them and they have to lay off like 100 people. I never wanted to do that.
Right.
Crispin Porter Bogusky in LA, that office isn't even there anymore because of that. So if I had stayed there, I wouldn't even have a job there anymore. So that's what we did. And that was it, man.
I love it.
So who would have thought an ad agency could run ads?
Yeah. There are so many lessons. So, and I think that's huge. Having something, that front end offer that makes sense to run ads that can not only create cash flow, but also just like predictability and stability and build you a pipeline of paying prospects, right? So it's all those amazing things. One of the things I think is really interesting there, you talked about your partner and you talked about making hard decisions of letting people go sometimes and the challenges of that. Talk to us about where your perspective is now on strategic partnerships and things that people should be mindful of if they're considering one.
So I've been in a few partnerships. I was partners with Roland Gardner in the MMA fight, and he was going through some crazy stuff at the time, bankruptcy. I don't know if you know him. He's like he's the Olympic gold medalist.
Oh,
who beat the Russian who had not been beat in like 300.
Didn't he? Is he the one that
we're still
lost
buddies.
Fingers on a snowmobile or something?
Yeah, he lost a couple toes. And then he came back and still did well. Yeah. So that partnership didn't go great. Ended on okay terms. And then I joined this other little boutique agency, which actually they have grown, I think, to like 12, 15 employees now. And they're still around. The same. I was one of 4 partners. They're still doing pretty good. That didn't really work out. I went to LA to get this job, got a great job opportunity and took it. Didn't gel. I had two partners that I started with at Chamber, and we had done like 600 grand in revenue, and they still weren't willing to leave their day jobs, but they were getting 2/3 of the profits. And I was like doing some basic math, and I was like, guys, you got to jump on this train. And they weren't willing to. So I split from them, and it was an ugly split. Actually, I haven't really talked to him since.
Yeah, it's tough.
And it wasn't horrible. Like if I saw him now, it'd be chill, but I was pretty mad, man. It really rocked me. So I was very jaded towards partnerships. Hired an intern. They let me keep the intern. I actually had to make a new business entity. They let me keep the intern. And that intern is Stefan, who is still my partner today. And I don't know if Stefan and I have ever really had like that bad of an argument or that big of a disagreement. So my opinion of partnerships is that somebody has to be the guy. So I am not a fan of 50-50 partnerships. They haven't worked for me. Now I'm very like controlling. I can't handle being, I'm not controlling. I can't handle being controlled by somebody else. And so I'm not a usual personality, I'm moody and all that stuff. And Stefan is very even keeled and is focused on reason and logic, things like that. So we fit like perfect puzzle pieces. Like if Stefan was a woman, probably would be married. It's just,
I get it. It's that, yeah. And I think that's such an important thing in partnerships is like, it has to have a balance. There has to be a balancing effect, right? You have two personalities that are too similar. They're not going to, it's going to amplify sometimes your weaknesses, right? And then it also has to have logic, right? So there has to be a reason to have a partner instead of a employee. I think without those two things, some people just get into a partnership because of emotion. You were both there when an idea happened or whatever, but I think it's got to make sense. And so it's awesome that you found a partner that worked for you and you guys were obviously able to make some huge impact with the agency over the last little while. I would say there you should never start out with more than two partners ever. Oh, totally.
Because look at how many rock bands split up. Well, it's because there's 3 or 4 of them. And the second you have 3 or 4 brains that have to agree on a decision, you're dead in the water. Like you can't go anywhere. There's an agency in Utah that thought about buying us 3 years ago. Now we're 4 times their size. They have 4 partners, and those guys just bicker all the time. And there's so much friction between those. And they get along, but they can't. You get 4 or 5 people's emails on a decision, and you can't have that. And somebody has to be king or queen.
Yep.
At the end of the day, you've got to have an Elon or a Steve Jobs or a Bezos or well, think about it. It's never Musk or Bezos and no,
you got to the org chart has to be clear. And usually if there's a partnership involved, it's hard for one partner to be like, I'm okay. Day to day, you're going to be CEO and I'm going to be general manager. Like it's hard to separate that type of ego.
Like Google had Larry Page and Sergey, but I guarantee you one of them yielded and said the other one.
And at the beginning, the board didn't even allow them to run the company because they didn't think they were mature enough, right? So they actually weren't operator like the CEO for a while because of that. So they allowed. I think one of them is now the CEO, but it took a long time before that happened.
I can relate with that. I'm still not mature enough to run a company. Never will be.
Yeah, I'm working my way backwards in maturity. Every year, I like lighten up a little bit more.
I can manage 5 people better than anybody. The sun gets over 5, I'm the worst person.
Yeah, I'm trying to get to 2. I'm like, I'll talk to 2 people. They can manage the rest. But
2, man, I was at 2 for 3 years. 2 is an amazing number because you just have these incredible relationships and you're just in it together, and it's the same 2 people every day, and you're not down. That was the most magical time at Chamber when it was just 3 or 4 of us, man. Those were the days.
Let's imagine that you're not in the position you're in right now, and you had to start over today in today's market, in today's world, with today's tools, resources, technology. What would you do?
Same thing. I'd start an agency, probably start a service business of some kind.
Yeah.
And
So
if it
probably
wasn't
same thing,
agency,
creatives and ads.
yeah,
There you go. That's good. Hey, that's huge.
probably.
A lot of people, if they're like,
Yeah.
oh, if I could restart over, I would, and there'd be a pivot. And you're like, no, I just do this again. And I love that. That's good.
You know, we pivoted a lot and we pivoted so well, man. Like the stuff that we're doing now, we still don't have very many competitors. It's a good business. You know,
Yeah.
It took me a long time to realize it. It took having a CFO who actually understood the numbers. And it took our strategic partners we brought in being like, no, this is an amazing business. What are you talking about? It's an amazing business. And it is hard. It was a grind, but if I was starting now, like I would have done it the same way. I wouldn't have raised money. I wouldn't have tried to start a product business because that's really tough. I would have started with the service. I would have grown it slowly. The only difference is I probably would have tried to bring in, I don't know, man. It took 4 years to get case studies, to get good case studies. And it takes case studies to get something scalable. And then it takes something scalable to get really high-end people. Like this CFO we just got, we couldn't have got him 2 years ago. We couldn't afford him and he wouldn't have been interested in us. So I don't know. I wouldn't do anything differently because it was so hard, but the steps required to learn and to go through all those processes, it was totally worth it.
So I'm a big believer that business is about lifestyle. It's what we talked about at the beginning. Like business is there to fund your lifestyle and it's fun. But if too many people take it too seriously, that being said, and you've got some cool stuff going on in your life. So what's one item on your personal bucket list, not business, that you're going to do in the next 12 months?
Well, not business.
Yeah, man, not business.
I'm going to try to get healthy. I have like the really bad sinus problems. And it's really crippling. It's like almost like a disability. And I've always just powered through it and ignored it because I'm like, dude, I can't pay attention to this. I got to feed the family, man.
Yep.
But now that I'm slowing down, I'm like, whoa, I was just living on cortisol and pumping myself up every day this whole time, which may have been the catalyst for my success of like, I have to make a lot of money quickly because I don't know how much longer I can handle this. And when I get older, so now I'm like, I'm going to go get a surgery. I'm going to try and get my sinus stuff fixed. That's my goal.
And then obviously you're spending more time with the family and traveling, which is awesome. So Travis, really appreciate you. People can find you on Instagram at Travis_Chambers and Chamber Media. It's pretty easy to find them on the internet. But really appreciate you coming out, sharing your story, sharing the lessons that you learned along the way. To all my Biz Ninjas, wherever you're listening, it's your turn to go out and do something.
Thank you for listening to Biz Ninja Entrepreneur Radio with Tyler Jorgensen. Please make sure to subscribe so you're first to hear new interviews and episodes. If you found this podcast to be valuable, please share it with a friend. Don't forget to visit our online dojo at bizninja.com to claim your reward for listening to the show.